I'm sitting here with Richard Stallman. 30 years ago, you founded the Free Software Foundation. It came into being. How did you come aware that it is such an initiative is necessary, that it is necessary for software to become free?
I was using free software in the 1970s. I was part of a software sharing community that was centered, you might say, at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab and other neighboring labs at MIT, but also included people at other universities, including Stanford, for instance. All the software we used was free. The operating system we used, the Incompatible Time-Sharing System, or ITS, was written by hackers for hackers. It was also used by the non-hackers at the lab, but the people who wrote it were the hackers. And we were happy to share code with anybody. We were delighted when someone found our code to be of use.
Mm-hmm. So the free software is kind of the default state, the software that was proprietary.
No, that's too much of a leap. I was talking about our community. But it's true that in general, there was a lot of free software in the early days of computing. As late as the 1970s, many operating systems were developed by computer manufacturers and distributed as free software. All the operating systems from Digital Equipment Corporation in the early 70s were free. You got the source code. There was no copyright notice on it, no attempt to stop anybody from doing anything.
Was that
and with no copyright notice in the United States at that time, that meant it was in the public domain.
Yeah.
So, which is, by the way, how it should be. That's why I once held a protest in Bern against the Bern Convention. Things should not be automatically copyrighted. That's bad for society.
I agree there. Yeah.
In any case, when I started working there in 1971, our free software was not shocking and unusual. Yes, proprietary software existed also, but free software was not unusual in the computer field at that time. By the end of the 70s, we still used free software, and we were the last island of freedom, as far as I know, anywhere in the world. Software had become totally proprietary all around, except where we were. And I began to get glimpses of what life was like in computers elsewhere.
Like a dystopian view of the future.
Totally horrible.
Yeah.
Because these were not personal computers, of course. These were larger, shared computers. And with proprietary software went a strict system of security, which was essentially a fascist police state. Mm-hmm. And our standard term, not just mine, but everyone's at the Artificial Intelligence Lab for those systems, was fascism. Yeah. When you ran into security on a computer system that stopped you from doing what you were trying to do, which might have been your job, for instance, we called it fascism. We hated it. Whereas most people thought of it as inescapable, impossible to avoid, we hated it.
Yeah, I understand that.
We knew that it wasn't inevitable because the hackers who wrote the Incompatible Time-Sharing System did not put in any security. They knew in 1969, I believe, when they started writing the time-sharing system, that if they put in any kind of security features, the administrators would use it to control them. Mm-hmm. So they decided not to put those things in. No passwords, no file access control. Anybody could do anything. And they realized that this way the administrators wouldn't know how to implement these things. Yeah. If the hackers refused to do it, the administrators wouldn't have it. And this inspired me tremendously. It taught me you can resist pressure to do wrong. Mm-hmm. Just by saying no, you can often succeed.
But somehow, isn't it inevitable that you have let's say if you have a company that develops a software costs
Well,
2
if
million
a company
francs,
develops a software, it's
then
likely to be evil and disgusting, and you shouldn't use it. Fortunate that wasn't
who should
true at the
support?
beginning.
Should?
I don't know what you're talking about. You're changing subjects too fast.
Okay.
You're changing subjects too fast, and I haven't finished talking about this one. So we began to discover that life in computers outside of our lab meant being crushed under the heel of administrators whose normal attitude was any attempt to get out from these chains we've put on you means you're a rebel and we're going to punish you. Mm-hmm. That attitude came to them naturally.
But were you kind of a rebel? Let's say, was that point of view maybe understandable because you still, I think, you have a rebellious part in you?
Well, I wasn't for the most time that I worked at MIT. Mm-hmm. I was independent. I didn't let administrators tell me what to do, but my job was to think of ways to improve the system. And I listened to users and what they wanted, and I would pay attention to their suggestions, and I had ideas too, and the users were happy with the things I did. Some of them loved the things I did, and so the administrators were generally happy with my work. But if they wanted a particular thing that I thought was wrong, I might just ignore them. For instance, one professor had an administratorial turn of attitude, and he decided to make some user forms that every user was supposed to fill in. And at one point, he was in the elevator with me about a year or two after the user forms had been introduced, and he said that I hadn't filled them out. And I said, that's true. And he said, well, that might lead to problems. Somebody might delete your directory. I said, that would be most unfortunate since at the moment, parts of the system code happen to be in my directory. I advise you to make sure it doesn't get deleted.
But you didn't like that. Maybe that was simply an administrative measurement. So that
right, exactly. That's what was wrong with it.
You didn't like that. You didn't want.
The point is, right, keeping track of people for no good reason. But I objected to.
Isn't it if you have an organization of a certain size, let's say the university...
Sorry, stop trying to come up with these theoretical proofs that it had to be done when the fact is it didn't have to be done. Mm-hmm. I was there. Things worked just fine without that, except maybe for some of his wishes, but his wishes didn't have to be satisfied. Uh-huh. So you're trying to invent a purely hypothetical, theoretical argument to justify his position.
I'm not sure if it's...
No, you're just speculating, you're guessing. What's the point of that? I know that I never filled out those user forms and nothing bad happened as a result. So I have facts, and you're trying to oppose them with theories, and you're claiming that these theories can't ever be wrong. Well, they were wrong that time, so maybe they're not very good theories.
Maybe,
in any case,
I would agree.
Please, I think that's a bad way to approach me.
Okay.
Because I will always react with hostility to attempting to impose a presupposition that is unfriendly and based on nothing. That's not going to get any thoughtful responses from me because it will make me angry. And I don't think as well. I have to struggle to think clearly and express myself clearly when I'm angry. So whatever the issue is, you can bring it up without claiming I'm wrong. You don't have to claim I'm wrong. You can raise any issue in a neutral way so that I or whoever it is can then respond without having to go against pressure from you.
Okay. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, so in any case, I remember another thing he did. There was a guest user, we used to call them tourists, who was a friend of somebody who worked there. He was a kid, he was a teenager, who had chosen the login name Stan.K. And that professor demanded he change his username and claimed that there was a certain program that was not working right because there was a dot in his username, and started to harass him. So I just fixed the bug in that program, and I said, I fixed this program, now it handles dots and usernames just fine. And of course, I was doing this to be rebellious because it meant that the professor could no longer have claim to have any justification in demanding that Stan change his username. But I fixed the problem.
I think your manifesto is very important, and I want to talk about how.
But I'd like to talk about how this relates to free software.
Yeah.
Because in around 1980 or so, computers were spreading, and they were always with non-free, freedom-trampling software. And I heard about a student residence at Harvard which had a computer, which had some time sharing, and they were imposing very strict security, and they had adopted the policy that anything which looks like it's trying to evade security control means that you're a troublemaker and we're going to kick you off. So I suggested to them that they should do something like what we did, namely they should give each computer to a group of students and let those students manage it. Now, there was somebody I know who had actually done this at a high school in the Boston area. For the first time, there was a time-sharing system in a high school. And he, who had been at MIT, was the teacher running it, and he let the students maintain it too. Those students who wanted to, of course, because some were interested and the others were not. He also let the students make the rules. So I suggested that Harvard could let each group of students have a computer and use that computer together, and instead of imposing security, a few of them imposing security on the rest, they could just learn to get along and not mess up each other's files and so on, like a group of people living together. And the employee that I was talking with said, we can't possibly do that. We have proprietary software on the computer, and we have signed a contract saying we can't let the students see what this software does, and thus we have to maintain a clampdown on them all the time. This taught me something about proprietary software, namely it brings with it oppressive treatment of users.
Maybe we should explain to the listeners what the time-sharing system does. I think not everyone knows that.
A time-sharing system is a computer in which many people log in at the same time. And then they run the programs they want to run, and they do the things they want to do.
So because calculating power is precious, you have to split it up fairly.
Computers were very expensive in the 1970s and even in the 80s. A powerful computer you probably couldn't afford. In the 1970s, our time-sharing system computer cost millions of dollars. By the 80s, it was getting somewhat cheaper. There were some that might only cost you $100,000. By the end of the 80s, a PC was a 32-bit PC was available, and you could do everything on that. But that was the progress of computing technology, which led to changes in how people used it. Nowadays, most people have never seen a time-sharing system.
Of course, yeah.
But for me, that was the normal thing.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got your own computer, you can have security on it because you're in control and you're not oppressing yourself. So who are you hurting? Nobody. So in any case, so I'm not against security in a personal computer or a server.
It's necessary.
I was never against security in a bank's computer.
You have Russian crackers out there.
The point is, I'm not going to log in on the bank's computer. Even if I'm a customer of the
cash.
bank. No, the point is, even if I'm a customer of the bank, I deposit money, I withdraw money, but it's not. I'm not logging in and doing my computing on it. So there's no reason for me to care. For me to object to the security, and yes, I do want them to stop strangers from stealing our money. But when people are living their lives basically in a computer system, and it's a shared computer system, the only way to have security is with a fascist police state.
Yeah.
And therefore I fought against that. In the lab, we had a shared computer. We couldn't afford personal computers. And therefore, it had to be run in freedom. Mm-hmm. That's a problem we don't have anymore because we can have personal computers and keep our own things on our computers. And therefore, each one of us is free in our computers if the software is free, freedom, respect.
Today, the typical computer user is not the very sophisticated person who knows how to code, who has programmed their own operating systems.
Most programmers haven't written operating systems either.
But it's maybe people like my mom, she needs a computer which is very easy to operate, who does a lot for her.
GNU/Linux is easy enough to use if you use graphical interfaces. Mm-hmm. You don't have to use the command line. You don't have to learn how to do that.
But you would
it's
say
as different from Windows as one version of Windows is from another.
Your mother, is she still alive? Does she use computer?
She does.
But you have to help her. I assume.
I don't. But there was somebody who lived in New York who helped her. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't live there anymore. He moved to the Boston area.
So what would you say Steve Jobs, he invented prisons for users of Apple. I think he invented prisons with golden bars.
Let me say, well, you could say it that way. That's not the way I say it. He figured out a way to make computers that are jails for their users and make them so shiny that millions of fools would beg to be jailed.
Yeah. What do you think of those people? Are those people, they're not forced to do that. They buy their devices on their own will.
They're fools.
They're fools.
Yes.
So they don't know it better.
But because there's so many of them, they have an impact on society.
Yes.
And that impact is very harmful.
I agree. But do you think that they should be protected, those people? Should there be a law or should education like you do it with the free software?
We should arrange society so it doesn't have a current flowing towards folly. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't believe in prohibiting individuals from doing foolish things.
That wouldn't be free.
Right. But when people are being swept by social pressure over the waterfall, that is dangerous, and it's time to do something about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think about your success in the last 30 years? Were you successful, or if we see the success of Apple, then you would say probably you weren't that successful because the shiny prison of Steve Jobs is more appealing to people than your offer of free software.
Well, most computer users have never heard the idea of free software. They may have heard of open source, which is a different idea.
You don't like open source?
Well, I disagree with that idea. What you're simplifying. You often repeat my words to me in a simplified form, but the simplification changes the meaning. Remember, open source is used to describe a set of software which is almost exactly free software, but it's not exactly the same. So those programs are free software. I think they're good. By and large, I think they're good. I may dislike a few of them. But at the level of ideas, open source is a totally different idea based on different values, and its purpose was to hide our ideas from public view. So I don't like that very much. But most people who say they're developing open source software are developing free software. Nearly all of them, in fact. And what they're doing is ethical and is a contribution to society. But in any case, because businesses like their ideas better, which is because they don't criticize proprietary software. So businesses that make proprietary software would rather talk about open source, which won't lead anyone to see criticisms of them, than talk about free Libre software, which will lead to a criticism of them. Thus, companies such as IBM and Oracle and Microsoft and Apple talk about open source.
Yes.
They don't talk about free software at all. As a result, most users have never heard of the free software movement. They've never seen our ideas. So they never rejected our ideas. They never had a chance to consider them. And that's something we have to work constantly to overcome.
I hope I don't...
But it's certainly true in regard to the amount of measuring, estimating our success. Well, considering that we started at near zero at the beginning of 1984, we have advanced a lot. At that time, it was impossible to do anything on any modern computer without proprietary operating systems and other proprietary programs too. So we made it possible. We have developed free operating systems, free applications, and free low-level software as well to do many things. Free drivers, for instance, free startup boot software, and there are millions of people using it. So in absolute terms, we have done a tremendous amount. You can get free software to run in your Wi-Fi router.
Yes, you can.
You can protect your freedom in large areas of computing. But when you compare this to how big computing is, you see that we have partly liberated a small fraction of users, and that's and so many of them are not free at all.
And probably it's getting smaller because nowadays a lot of people in the third world countries are getting in touch to the computing world via smartphone, via mobile
by totally
phone.
Oppressive systems.
And those are not free. They're less free than computer operating systems.
Yes, they're more oppressive. Basically, they illustrate the general tendency of the proprietary world to keep augmenting the power of the company over the individuals.
But can you be a proponent for free software without being against capitalism? Because for me, it's always, I think, those big companies, Apple, Microsoft, Oracle, Adobe, you mentioned a lot of them, they are always following the capitalistic rule
but
that they want to
maximize
maximize
inference.
Yeah.
You've pointed out an evil tendency in capitalism, and then you're suggesting one must be against capitalism.
So you think we
They're
cannot
not-
control capitalism?
Well, please don't guess. Please let me say
Okay.
what I think instead of guessing. Capitalism is a system where there are private businesses. I'm not against that. I'm for that. On the other hand, businesses are constantly looking for ways to get too much power and start to hurt people. Adam Smith said, anytime people in the same trade meet, they're looking for a way to conspire to set up some kind of trust and monopoly and mistreat the rest of the world. So we need the state to regulate businesses and be very tough about this to stop businesses from hurting us. And we've got to make sure that the businesses don't get very big, because if they're big, they're going to mistreat people.
But that doesn't happen at the moment.
What
Companies
that's right.
are
States
getting bigger and bigger.
Right, states are failing to do their job. And this connects with an ideology of extreme capitalism. Capitalism says it's useful to have private enterprise and competition. But there are various kinds of capitalist systems. The U.S. in the 1960s regulated business a lot more because the U.S. then was a democracy. And people wanted to regulate businesses more, and they got what they wanted. Businesses were seen to be doing various kinds of harm, so people pushed for and achieved laws to regulate businesses to stop them from doing some of these harmful things. But now that has been replaced by extreme capitalism, which basically says the world exists to be prey for businesses. Mm-hmm. Everyone else is of no importance except in terms of what businesses and the rich can get out of them. This is an evil, tyrannical philosophy. It's a regime that is the enemy of most people, and we need to put an end to it.
So how
and that, by the way, is why I support Sanders for president.
I wanted to talk about that, but we can talk about that right now. Do you think? How would you describe yourself? Are you a philosopher? Are you?
I'm a philosopher in a non-academic way.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it'll turn better? Are you optimistic? I
am a pessimist by nature. Mm-hmm. So, but in any case, I can't see the future, and I know that because I've seen many things happen that I never had the slightest glimmering of before I saw them happen. So I know I can't tell what the future is going to be like. I expect to be surprised by it. But in any case, when you're fighting against injustice, it's foolish to try to say whether you're going to win or not. Because if you believe you're going to win, you're underestimating the enemy, and if you believe you're going to lose, you might be foolish and give up.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in what's going to happen. I'm interested in what I should do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What should I do today? What's a good thing for me to do today to help the world, to help make the world a better place? And I can get some answer to that without knowing how successful I'm going to be, mm-hmm. because I'm sure it's better to try than to give up. So then giving up just guarantees defeat. So obviously you have to do your best.
Then let me talk about how nowadays, young people, maybe let's say a 16-year-old school child, student, how should he communicate with the modern world?
I don't know what that means. I'm sorry, that's too abstract.
Let's say I have a son. I don't have a son, but he's 16-year-old. He goes to school.
Sorry,
he studies.
my advice to people is the same regardless of their age.
Okay.
Reject non-free software.
So he should. What machine should he buy?
Well, he should get one of the laptops, or there may be some desktop machines too, but a laptop is more useful for most people. So you should get one of the laptops that we recommend in fsf.org/resources/HW, which run with entirely free software. You can even buy the machine from people who buy them and put in free software and resell them, and that way they come with free software.
But he shouldn't use a mobile phone.
I urge everyone to reject mobile phones because they are surveillance tools. So a mobile phone, whenever it's transmitting, is tracked, and the phone company records those locations. It's not just that they always do record where you have been. In addition, since the software in the phone has a universal backdoor, it can be remotely converted into a listening device. And once that is done, it listens all the time and transmits all conversation. And you can't shut it off either, because it pretends to shut off and really keeps running and listening and transmitting. So the only way to make it stop is to remove all the batteries. Because sometimes there's a big battery that you can tell is a battery, and there's a little battery somewhere else that can't be removed.
So I shouldn't use this mobile phone here, which has the non-removable battery.
The point is, you shouldn't use a mobile phone at all, because with these two, the fact that it tracks people everywhere and can listen to them at any time. Not just when you're making a call, it can listen to all the conversation in the room. Your phone might be listening to our conversation right now. It might listen to every conversation you ever have. It might hear everything your sources tell you about any topic. So I call this Stalin's dream. Because if Stalin, please don't break in on me to stop me from talking.
No,
please don't do that.
I agree. I try to agree.
Yeah. So, in any case, I call it Stalin's dream because this is exactly what Stalin would have wanted. If Stalin could have given a mobile phone to everyone in the Soviet Union, he would have done so. Because to be able to see everywhere people go and listen to all their conversations is exactly what he wanted. The NSA, we know this thanks to our hero Edward Snowden, can tell the two people are meeting with each other because their phones are close together. So the idea of carrying such a thing outrages me. And 20 years ago, it would have outraged you too. If you had heard about mobile phones and the next thing you heard about was that they track people everywhere and they could listen all the time, you would have said, that's horrible, I will not carry such a thing. And that's exactly what I did. Except that you apparently have given way to pressure from pressure on one hand and convenience on the other. But I have a very strong will to oppose things I consider oppressive. And listening to everybody all the time, tracking everybody everywhere, this is a threat not just to the individuals who are treated this way, but to democracy as well. So it's not just for my own sake that I refuse to be tracked this way. It's my duty as a citizen to refuse. And I can't tell you what to do, but I'm doing my duty. And I hope everyone else will do their duty, except if everybody else gets this up in arms, they can require the system to be changed. The system the system of mobile phones should be designed so it doesn't record the position of any phone unless a court has ordered tracking of that particular phone. This could be done perfectly well.
Let's go back to my
And as
16...
for the universal backdoor that they use to convert the software, well, backdoors in software released to the public should be a crime. You should go to prison for that.
There's a need for legislation that opposes that.
Right. If that were done, I might use a mobile phone if all the software were free, of course, because I won't use non-free software.
Back to the 16-year-old student.
I don't know why you talk about a 16-year-old student. What difference does that make?
Because maybe he's a non-experienced...
Does it matter if he's 16 or 46?
Probably.
66? I don't see why.
The pressure in his peer group is higher.
Well, maybe I don't know about that.
He's less
I don't know
informed.
About that.
He's less
I don't
informed.
know about that.
He's using
Sorry,
Facebook.
I wouldn't assume any of these things.
Okay.
Lots of people at many ages are ill-informed about these issues, and they're subject to social pressure. I urge everyone to reject unjust computing.
For the route, I just wanted to ask you, do I have to buy a specific
router? There may be only one different thing about that 16-year-old, which is that 16-year-old is going to school. And some schools are now demanding that students run non-free software, and some heroic students are refusing. Some are refusing.
Yeah.
Some students say, I won't take this. I won't touch this. I won't run that software.
But if teacher says you have to...
Then some students say no. And they must say no. This is where we need heroism. We need people to fight for freedom. Because when schools become supporters of ignorance...
Yeah.
And that's what it is. Remember, a non-free program is the enemy of the spirit of education. It represents dependence on a particular company, and it represents teaching people not to help each other, teaching people to be bad members of society. The school that adopts non-free software is doing all those bad things. It is a perversion of a school. And it must be fought by everyone that has any relationship with the school. If you're a parent and your school tells your child to use non-free software, you should say no. If they send your child home with some non-free software, you should say, this is not allowed in the house.
Yeah.
You've got to go all out at that point, because otherwise it will be making you surrender and making your child surrender.
Here in Switzerland we have ISPs, internet providers that required by law to store your data about your internet usage. You're surveyed by law.
This is evil, of course, but if you connect through Tor, they can't tell what you're connecting to.
So you use Tor for all the time?
Anytime I connect to a website other than Wikipedia, it's through Tor.
But the NSA increases surveillance on Tor users?
Actually, no. The NSA, when it makes a special effort, can identify some people using Tor. But they're mainly interested in doing that for people accessing particular sites, which, and I'm just looking at ordinary sites that anybody might very well look at. When I do that, I go through Tor, and I never identify myself to them because I don't want them to know who is connecting or where I am.
Yeah. We've talked more than half an hour, as I told you we would. So
we haven't dealt with the most important issue.
What's the most important issue?
Well, I talked about it yesterday, so you have a recording of it, right?
I didn't record the session yesterday.
Oh, well, they recorded it, so you should get that before you get that recording before you...
They put it online.
Well, are you in connection with Alexis? Alexis Riegel.
Yes.
Well, you can get it from him. He organized the talk.
Yeah.
So,
but explain.
No point. But listen, get the recording before you write, because I talked at length about the proposed Swiss copyright law.
I wrote about that. We covered it in our paper critically.
Good, but so I may have said some things that you didn't cover, and this is the most
notes.
Good. This is the most important thing that I'm talking about here in Switzerland. There's a tendency for evil laws in Switzerland nowadays. Surveillance laws and this copyright law.
Which is heavily influenced from US...
right, basically...
rights holders.
Well, yeah, and Switzerland, the Swiss people should tell them and the US to jump in Lake Zurich.
Yeah. But...
by the way... what lives in the Thunersee?
I don't know.
Thunfish.
Yeah, I don't think they have tunfish. You
but
went
that's
fishing?
A joke.
Do you? Yeah, of course. But do you go fishing somewhere?
I don't. I don't have the patience to go fishing.
Me neither. I have some colleagues, but
I prefer making puns.
That's a very. We didn't talk about your Church of Emacs. That's a very a side of you we didn't cover in this interview, which is a pity.
Well, the thing is, there are some people who dismiss any attempt to raise issues of right and wrong by calling it religion.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, they're saying any criticism of any action on ethical grounds is nothing but arbitrary dogma. It's a general excuse to disregard any ethical criticism of what they do. And I have received that kind of criticism plenty of times. And at one point I decided to make fun of it by being a saint and describing what I stand for as a religion.
It's sometimes...
But actually I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
The Church of Emacs is only a joke. And taking any religion too seriously, even the Church of Emacs, may be hazardous for your health. Around 1990 it was that somebody on a GNU discussion list called me a mad imam.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else responded saying, yes, Emacs is Emacs, the text editor, is our religion, and Stallman is our pope. We worship the ground he walks on, and we will follow him to the death. And this mailing list is our church. So don't come into our church and start insulting our pope. And if you don't agree, why don't you start your own church and see how many people come? And that basically chased away that critic. But it left me thinking of this particular humoristic idea, so that's why I decided to become Saint Ignatius, the Pope of the Church of Emacs.
But do all the people understand that this is a joke, or are there...
There's so many jokes in it, and people laugh at them, so I think everyone understands.
But some of them they have that GNU Linux proponents, they have that religious fever, I would say. I met some.
Well, maybe some do, but that doesn't discredit the ethical ideas.
No, it doesn't. As a final...
And I tell people, if somebody points a gun at you and tells you to use a non-free program, I suggest you do what he says. I would.
Yeah, okay.
At least for a while, until I could...
It's better than get shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
But that doesn't mean it isn't an important cause.
No.
No, there's a difference between going to 95% to fight for the cause and going to absolutely 100%. But 95% can be enough to win.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But if you only go 5%, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. The people who say, I'll use free software only when it's convenient, they're going to lose their freedom. Those people don't understand that freedom sometimes requires a sacrifice. And from Swiss history, we learn that when people are willing to sacrifice for their freedom, they can win.
Yeah, the historian, I don't want to go there, but I guess I agree on that. But final question.
Even though there are some myths in early Swiss history about details,
talk about the myths.
But the Swiss fought and they fought and they fought over and over. That is fact.
Yeah, I guess we can meet on that ground.
So even
So
though
now,
right, we don't have to believe in Wilhelm Tell to believe that the Swiss people fought the nobles' armies, and they fought many, many, many times, and they won and they won and they won.
Yeah.
So now it's time to fight again.
Yeah. So my light ran out of juice. I guess that's a sign for me to come to the last question, and that would be we often talked about convenience, and I guess convenience, we could say, that is winning right now. The cloud.
There is no cloud.
I know you.
There's no such thing as a cloud.
It's other people's computers.
It's computers belonging to various owners, located in various countries under various laws, offering to do various jobs with various kinds of data that you might give them or that they might get from you without your knowledge. And depending on what these things are, they might be good or they might be bad. Yeah. So the first thing to do in thinking about those questions is stop using vague general terms. Don't cloud your mind. Look at what somebody is proposing to do, in which computer, in which country, and what data it will have, and how you can and how you can stop it from misusing that data, and whether it's doing something you ought to have control over, and whether you would have control over what it does. Because there are some services where they rent you a virtual machine and you have total control over what it's going to do. So in terms of your control over your computing, that's fine. So the point is, these are not all bad. They're just all different. And the error of the term, quote, cloud, unquote, is that it encourages people to ignore the crucial all the crucial questions.
I wanted to refer on the convenience, and those services are very convenient. Smartphones are convenient.
But why do people care more about that than about freedom? Because of massive PR campaigns. In the major media, you will find most of what is said presumes that convenience is more important. It's the most important thing. That's and that everybody agrees, except maybe a few people who must be nuts.
It makes your
life easier. Of course, you could never. Sure. Right, but the point is, yes, that's true, but that doesn't predetermine what people's priorities will be, what their values will be. But this discourse teaches values. It's pressuring and encouraging people to value their immediate convenience more than their freedom. And people with those values will lose their freedom. The way you keep your freedom, the way you win it back, is by first valuing it enough to go out of your way for it. Now, I'm sure if the Swiss farmers who fought the nobles' armies had decided to do whatever was most convenient that day, they would have paid tribute and let the nobles back in. Because on that day, it was a lot more convenient. But look at Microsoft's slogan, "Where do you want to go today?" I guess it was 10 or 15 years ago now that it used that slogan. Where do you want to go today? And our slogan was, how do you want to live 10 or 15 or 20 years from now? So different values are embodied by those words. And what your values are is the most important decision for you to make. We're surrounded by commercialized discourse that says, think most about what you could buy from somebody today. That's the most important thing for you. And that's bad advice.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you want to live in 10 years, to pick that
I want
question
freedom. I want democracy, not plutocracy. That's why I'm supporting Sanders for president, because he will really try to fight plutocracy to defeat it. And that's absolutely necessary. A study that investigated political decisions in the U.S. found that since some point around 1990, or maybe in the 1980s, all decisions matched what the elites and the special interests wanted. What people in general wanted made no difference at all. And that's in contrast to the 1970s, when we still had democracy. Well, a non-democratic government is fundamentally unjust. That's what we have in the U.S. today. We must bring back democracy, whose purpose was to make the non-rich stronger together than the rich. That's what it was invented for in Athens. Mm-hmm. So that the non-rich would dominate the state rather than the rich. That the rich would not be able to get things their way. We need to bring that back in the U.S. Right now, the U.S. government is a tool of special interests and rich. And right now, that tool is being used to bully Switzerland into oppressing Swiss people in regard to copyright law. It's being used to bully many countries into making unjust trade agreements.
Mm-hmm. How can we allow, as internet users, that the internet today is not a means of democracy, but becoming more and more a means of oppression?
I couldn't quite parse that question. What should we do? What can we do to stop the internet from being like that?
That the internet is a tool of surveillance rather than a tool of free speech.
We can reduce the surveillance, but again, it requires political will. Switzerland is increasing surveillance in many ways. For instance, they just changed the Swiss pass so that it will track what travel people do. Mm-hmm. Now, how can you stop that? Here's an idea. Start a movement where you refuse to swipe. You just have your Swiss pass. Refuse to put it in the machine on any of your travel. And say, if anyone tries to control you, say, well, now that you're here, I'll run it through if you like. But the state has no right to know everywhere I go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And really, what can they complain about? You paid, after all. All you didn't do was allow yourself to be surveilled. So resist. Say no. I won't swipe it. All you need really is that I paid. See, I did pay. This is me. So, on what grounds do you demand to know where I go? How dare you attack the rights of Swiss citizens this way? And if they come across lots of people saying that, they may have to change the policy. Of course, from what I understand, in Switzerland, it's possible for the people to get the law changed too.
It is.
And you should. You should insist on changing that back. because surveillance threatens democracy, and this is the crucial point. If the state knows everywhere people go and who talks with whom, then it is impossible to be a whistleblower, in other words, a journalist's source, without being caught. And that means the state can do things that are secret from the people, and that means you don't have democracy anymore. So for democracy's sake, you need to resist all the surveillance systems or require them to be redesigned not to surveil.
Richard Stallman, thanks a lot.